Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. You'll hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and writers that cover the NFL on a daily basis. The New Orleans Saints podcast starts right now. Here's your host, Erin Summers.
Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. I'm Erin Summers. It is here, finally. It is game weekend. First game of the season, Sunday, Carolina Panthers in the Caesars Superdome, 12 o'clock. The Saints have wrapped up practices as of Friday. They will have a walkthrough tomorrow, so a little bit more work is going to be put in before kickoff on Sunday. That is when it all goes down. Here's head coach Dennis Allen on what he wants to see from his team.
Well, look, we need to go out and play good football. And look, I think we've won our last 5 openers, something like that. You know, last year we won our first 2, so we've been pretty good at getting off to a fast start in terms of to the season. We've got to do a better job of keeping that momentum going. But I think it's just our guys going out and playing football the way that the New Orleans Saints want to play football. And I think, us doing that will be plenty good enough.
I will give it to DA. He was close, but the Saints have won 4 straight openers. A win Sunday will make it 5. The injury report for that game has only 4 Saints listed as out: linebacker Jalen Ford, tight end Dallin Holker, linebacker DeMarco Jackson, and defensive tackle Colin Saunders. Wide receiver A.T. Perry, who's missed the last 2 practices with a hand injury, is listed as questionable, along with guard Nick Saldiveri and linebacker Willie Gay Jr. Cornerback Marshawn Lattimore and linebacker Pete Werner, who were listed on the injury report throughout the week, have no designation for Sunday and will be full goes. For our podcast guest today, NFL Fox play-by-play Chris Myers joined me while he was here at the facility to take in practice and talk to coaches and players. We break down the matchup Sunday against the Panthers and reminisce on Myers' time in New Orleans. Chris, thank you so much for joining us on the New Orleans Saints podcast as you get ready to call the Saints' first game of the season. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's always great to come back where I spent some key years of my life, to be in New Orleans and to see the Saints fans and sense their optimism. So, yeah, I'm excited.
You are right back in your early stomping grounds as you worked for WWL. What do you remember about that experience? Well,
for me, I came from Florida, and it was a great job opportunity. And I noticed right away, at that point, the Pelicans weren't here, so it was all Saints. Obviously LSU, Tulane as well. So it was football, and I saw the transition from the baghead days of not winning and the frustration to joy and happiness and success. And even when I moved on to ESPN and then Fox and covered the NFL and still got to cover the Saints, obviously enjoying their Super Bowl success. But now it's a new era. We have to move on from the Breeze, Peyton, and it's taken a while. I mean, I know this is 3rd year for Dennis Allen, but it takes a while to detach yourself from that. But from those days, that's really what stood out. I mean, the greatest compliment was when I left here, is some of the people after spending 6 years, they said, well, it's great to see one of our own, do well and move on. So I felt like somebody that belonged. They treated me so well here. And I always love coming back for the food, of course. That's part of the deal as well.
Everyone here is so nice. And if you love the city, you fit right in. It's just such a great vibe that they will definitely welcome you back with open arms. You said that you went to Commander's Palace last night. Right. I know you're going to hit all of the spots, but you also mentioned this is where you met your wife.
Yeah, I actually met her in the Superdome, right? Before, obviously, when we were obviously both single back in those days working in New Orleans, and I met her there. She was doing some volunteer work. And so I was doing Jim Mora's radio show at the time while working WWL TV. And we went out to dinner after we'd been dating a while with Jim Mora and his wife at Commander's Palace. And we were in the guard room, and that's where Jim Mora, and how he was so abrupt, the way he spoke up, and he said, well, you've been dating her a while. She looks like a number 1 draft pick. When are you going to get married? I was like, whoa, hey, so we were thinking about it, Susan and I. So I actually said, hey, if you make the playoffs, then we'll get married. I thought it was a safe bet at the time. The Saints had never made the playoffs. And then, of course, that year, Jim Mora Saints finally get into the playoffs, and he sent a registered letter to my house.
Oh my
saying,
gosh.
"This is official. Susan and Chris have to get married." He was having fun with it, but we were kind of planning it. So then I had to kneel down and do the whole proposal thing. But my wife and her family were kind of expecting it. But he helped seal the deal, so it was great to go back. My wife couldn't make it; she's back home on this trip. But I told her, sent her the picture. I just wanted to get some of the guys to go to Commanders because I hadn't been there in a lot of years back, which is always great. So a lot of history for myself and my, in New Orleans, and one that's a very important one. And she's still a diehard Saints fan, no matter where we travel around the country.
Okay, we love that because I know you're from Florida,
right?
And you work the preseason games. Calling the Tampa Bay games.
Buccaneers, yes, enemies of the Saints in the division. Yeah, and I spent a lot of time, by the way, in Charlotte, Carolina, covering NASCAR for Fox. So I have a lot of friends there that are Panther fans. So it's like I'm the NFC South guy, the dirty South, as they like to call it. And so it creates some dividing lines. But preseason games are important to get us ready for the Fox national or broadcast games where you have instead of 90 guys, there's 53 on a roster. So growing up in Miami, everybody was a Dolphin fan. Believe it or not, as a kid, I became a Rams fan for some reason because I wanted to live in LA as a kid. So I've always been kind of divided about who to root for beyond who I was working for. And when you get to the level at Fox here, you have to be impartial. But I will admit that sometimes, I always root for a close game or an overtime game because that means everybody had hope until the end. But along the way, you always remember the good coaches, players, and cities, and that helps a little bit in terms of impartiality about where you want to do a game.
Mm-hmm. It's okay. Your wife is a Saints fan. You can be a Saints fan. I know maybe after this weekend because you're calling the game.
Yes, I have to be impartial on Sundays anyway, at least. Yes, that's fair enough.
Well, you do have some experience with the Bucs, and the Panthers now have their former offensive coordinator as their new head coach, and Dave Canales. What is he going to bring to that team?
Yeah, it's a great point because Canales was given credit for reviving Geno Smith's career in Seattle, and then also Baker Mayfield, what a story that was. And I think he's one of the most positive, a Pete Carroll type of positive outgo, and it's very real. It's not just coach speak. So I noticed that about him right away. This is his first head coaching job. So he was inexperienced as a play caller last year, and there were some bumps in the running game. So I think that's where Carolina will try to do that, but they may have a tough learning curve, especially against this Saints defense. But I think his primary job is to help a young quarterback, Bryce Young, who I did a few of his games last year, and there wasn't a whole lot around him. It was a rough start, a rough year for them. But I did see in him, I think, an ability to handle things that aren't going well and not go negative, and not call out teammates, not complain. And the other part about Canales, Erin, I'll tell you, it's important. He also worked, he wasn't the main guy, but all those years with Russell Wilson in the good years in Seattle, another 5'10" range quarterback like we had with Drew Brees in that range, and like you have with Bryce Young now in Carolina. So he gets a little bit of the smallish quarterback, how you set up passing lanes, also how you roll him out or use his scrambling ability to be able to avoid some tough hits, so that physically, because he's still not bulked up as much as you'd probably like for an NFL quarterback. So I see that kind of influence right away. But overall, for a franchise that had a lot of negativity with Carolina, at least they got the right kind of guy to bring a positive attitude.
Do you know what you just did there?
What did I do there?
You said, like we had with Drew Brees.
Okay. Did I slip a we in there? See, I'm looking at your Saints shirt here. I'm in the building. I'm watching I see the old Dome Patrol, which that brings back memories. That your poster in the background. So you got me. I'm guilty. There it is on tape. Okay.
You mentioned Bryce Young, and he didn't have a lot of help last year. He had the most sacks out of the entire NFL last season, but they did ramp up the offensive line, and they added a lot of playmakers around him. How much better do you think that this offense is going to be, and how much are we going to see that this Sunday? Yeah,
well, from a Saints perspective, they don't want to see a whole lot of growth with him, but they had, even though Derek Carr last year swept the Saints swept Carolina. There was a close game early, I recall. I do think you'll see him protected better, as you talked about. Some of that was his fault too, and he'll admit it last year, holding the ball a little bit too long. But all he really had, and I think the line was that the Panther receivers had separation anxiety. They just couldn't get open. And so that was tough on a young quarterback trying to find somebody. They drafted Leggett from South Carolina, a fast, tall receiver. He's angular enough to get the ball to. They also added the receiver from the Steelers to help, who was their leading receiver last year. They're a little beat up at tight end. So I think, and the offensive line you hit to protect him a little bit more. If they just don't fall behind so much, then he won't have to throw so much. So I think you'll see them try to commit to the run. I've seen them have successful run games against some very good teams in the league with Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders. So that'll be the approach. But from a Saints standpoint, if they can get up on him, then that'll force him into the same kind of problems that they had last year. But yes, overall, they, at least on paper, and we didn't see a lot of them in the preseason, improved the offense and the people around Bryce Young. So that is good news for Carolina.
You mentioned the run game for Carolina, and it's something that the Saints have continued to talk about needing to establish to set up the kind of offense that Kubiak wants to play with the play action, the passing game. Going to be a heavy usage of Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill. How key is the Saints' ability to get those players going to be for them to get out to a good start? Yeah,
and I'm anxious to talk to after practice, which we'll go to our crew with Clint Kubiak. It's been a while since I've chatted with him, but obviously he was handpicked, by Dennis Allen and we'll say Derek Carr. There's a connection there. But you were asking about the Carolina offensive line. There's two new parts on the left side of the Saints line that I think will really make a difference to help the running game. And even though the offseason you heard some things, got some mixed reviews, it seems like Alvin Kamara's in a good space. Like, hey, contract stuff later now, focus on the game. He knows where he is in his career. I think a dynamic player, and with that combination of those two, I think that is important. But I still, and maybe it's old school connection to the Saints years, I love this. I think Carr can throw it, and Olave, throw it in a way that if he needs to light it up, like a guy who airs it out, can have not live on that, but have those big games with Rashid and Olave downfield. You can't force that, and a run game helps that. Carolina's defense went through a change. They're missing their top two sackers from last year. They spent a lot of time improving the offense. So I think there's a good chance for the Saints to kind of establish that run game, but especially at home to start the year. You don't want to go crazy, but you want to get ahead. You don't want to be too safe, too cautious, especially given the situation that, Carolina has the new head coach and some new players as well.
I think fans are expecting a lot out of this new offense and what it can be. And I don't think they were as satisfied with what they saw in the preseason, but we know how coaches are. They don't want to show everything then. So it is going to be interesting to see how much they air it out, what they do with all of the playmakers. As you mentioned, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and then even the tight ends. Jawan Johnson is a big target out there as well.
Yeah, and I think we keep waiting if he's healthy, and he's ahead of schedule coming back, but he's, I think, a breakout talent at that position if they get the ball to him. A lot will depend, too, on, and I think even Dennis Allen, the first game, you think what Carolina's going to do because you had some Canales experience last year going against the Bucs when he was there. But you'll wait and see, and that may figure out how much you want to be aggressive on offense to start the year. So, that feeling out process, familiar division opponents will take a little bit of a while. But, I'm a Carr fan. He's an easy guy to like, and root for with his personality. And so if he's, the offensive line hadn't been great last few years. So if that's better, I think it's a win all the way around.
Yeah, head coach Dennis Allen has talked a lot about how big adjustments are going to be, especially in game one. So that's definitely something to watch. Who adjusts better, faster, and can relay that to the team, get on the same page.
Yeah, and I'm curious. We hear about West Coast offense, and we've seen it run with other teams and the Kubiak name attached. But I'm curious to see how it is applied to the Saints, and what we see in this game may be a little different than what we see all season long. But one thing comes to mind is that some younger, less experienced quarterbacks have benefited in this kind of system. I think of Brock Purdy is a name that comes to mind. C.J. Stroud, I called quite a few of his games as a rookie last year. So I think for a veteran like Carr, if it's that same kind of system that will take, I want to say it makes it more comfortable for a quarterback, but a little less to worry about. So you can focus on just certain things that you want to focus on. And I think Carr will grasp that and do well with it.
Yeah. Defensively, the Saints have had one of the top defenses for a very long time. That's always something that they've excelled at, but they feel like they can reach a higher standard and they want to be even better than they have been. They added Chase Young, big defensive end there, and then linebacker Willie Gay Jr., who is just so athletic, flies around the field. What do you think the Saints can be this year in terms of how much better their defense can be?
Yeah, and they were, a top 10 defense last year. Statistically, we know how they finished the year. And offensively, one of the few teams that were in the top 10. Again, those are stats. Lost some close games, but finished strong. I think they can be, I know some people are kind of down on them a little. I think they could be even more dominant. I know they got some age on them, but as long as Lattimore, and I think he's coming in like Alvin Kamara, those were two guys I was curious talking to the staff about. You hear a lot of things. They need to be right in their headspace coming in, and I got the thumbs up from the coaching staff on him for to open this season. So that's big to me because you're thinking to Mario Davis, you've got and then Cam. So you got your main pieces, and you're right about Chase Young. I think he's going to be rotated in as much as a starter. I mean, he's kind of a regular. I know they were happy with him in the preseason. He's one of those guys who got a lot to prove. So I think they can be an even better defense. And again, taking the ball away is one of those things. If you do that enough and create some scoring opportunities like the dominant Saints defense, and that's Dennis Allen's, that's his calling card.
Yeah.
And he calls the defense, as he was telling us, that'll never change. Head coaches on offense, they get to call the offensive plays. I want to still call this defense, even though he's made a few adjustments on his staff defensively as well as offensively. So I think the defense is going to be strong. I think it can be even better. I don't see them taking a step backward unless there's some wear and tear on guys. But the veterans I've mentioned, I haven't seen it, and I don't think it'll show up early.
There must be a fountain of youth around here. I haven't found it, but these players definitely have. End of the year, the Super Bowl comes right back here, New Orleans. In February, who's going to be here?
Wow, that's a good question. Well, I was just watching the Chiefs the other night. I keep saying they're vulnerable, but they keep on winning.
Yeah.
I don't think I would lean against a three-peat only just because of the odds. But if anybody could do it the way Mahomes and Reed are working and their defensive staff, I think somebody in that AFC could throw them off. Maybe a Cincinnati or a Miami. I just think the extended seasons of so many back-to-back and those postseason runs will wear on a team, but not because of anything that Reed or Mahomes can't do. So NFC, and I'm looking at the Lions, who I know, certainly Saints fans can relate to what they have gone through as a franchise, never been to a Super Bowl. I think they finally get there. I think they can unseat the 49ers as the top two teams. And in the AFC South, as you said, it really, no disrespect to Carolina, but to me, it is a three-horse race. I know last year with the Derek Carr, everybody was jumping on the Saints bandwagon, at least nationally. They kind of disregard this division. This year, it's, Atlanta has Kirk Cousins and the entities. So we're ignoring, or at least sidestepping the Buccaneers, who've won 3 straight division titles, even though the record hasn't been great. And then they won a playoff game last year. So, and they have Baker Mayfield, who's been. So we need, when I say we, the Saints need a resurgent kind of Derek Carr. Not that he ever went away, but a Saints version of Derek Carr with the kind of defense that Dennis Allen has his guys playing, and a happy Kamara and a happy Lattimore. And I think the Saints can, if not win the division, at least be there at the end to fight for it.
How excited are you just to kick it all off finally?
It's I say America runs on football. I know it's a Dunkin' Donuts slogan, but it really does. The NFL, I mean, we all feel better when the season's, we all feel like we own a part of the team.
Games starting this week have been so fun.
Yeah, it energizes. You could just feel it when you're traveling, you're on a plane, you're going to a restaurant, no matter what the city is, what you read, what people talk about, even people from different parts of the country, you'll say, hi, how's the family? Oh, yeah, what about, I think the Bears are going to do well, whatever. So yes, it's exciting, and the NFL has done so many great things. And I love the fact that New Orleans, the Super Bowl. I mean, from covering it locally and then also on a national scale in New Orleans, around the league, the city has such great accolades for the way they do it. Between yes, the food and the atmosphere, but that everything is so closely compact. You can walk around and enjoy. I think it's going to be the 11th time overall, 8th in the Dome, right? Or with the in the Superdome that has renovations. So yeah, anxious to get in there too, to get a look tomorrow before we head out for Sunday's broadcast. But this is fun. Everybody, their heart races just a little bit more when football season comes around.
Definitely does. Thank you so much for the time. It's been great talking to you, and I look forward to hearing your call on Sunday.
All right, thanks for having me. Anytime.
Okay, can we go back to his story on his marriage? Because them meeting here in New Orleans at the Superdome is awesome. But when you have Jim Mora tell you to do something, I think you have to do it. And I can't imagine getting that in the mail from Mora saying, okay, it's time. You got to ask her. That's just a really cool story. Another cool story to come out of this week was the naming of Taysom Hill as captain. Despite everything Taysom has done, it is kind of wild that captain has not made it on his resume yet. So this is the first time Taysom Hill is going to have that honor. I was able to catch up with him after practice on Friday. All right, we haven't had a chance to talk to you about the captain that you're going to be this year. So how did that happen? How did you find out, and what does that mean?
Obviously we just take a team vote on who you want to represent you this year, and then every Monday night before the season we have a captain's dinner where the team is all together and DA says who's going to be captains for the season. So that's when I found out. That's how I found out. And look, I think at the end of the day, I think when you talk about being a part of a team and the best teams that you've been a part of, I think always comes down to this peer-to-peer accountability. So I feel like when I look at this, the greatest sign of respect, is this peer-to-peer recognition. And so to have an opportunity to represent this locker room, represent this team, it's hard to put in words what that means, but it means a lot to me.
Does it change anything that you're doing this upcoming season?
No, look, I think in terms of leadership to me, I've always been someone that's like, do what I do and not necessarily what I say. So, look, I think that there's part of that you need to make yourself available for young players. And I look back through my history here and I could list a number of players that have mentored me and made themselves available to me. And I think as someone, who's been in the NFL for a little while, that's part of your responsibility to make sure that younger players know how to prepare for a game.
Do you want to be more vocal, even though you've kind of been lead by example?
Look, I think that you have to find opportunities. I think I am a believer of see something, say something, So, look, I think if anyone, for that matter, sees something that's happening inside our program, I think it's important to say something. So I am a big believer in that. So I feel like I've been that way. And so when there's opportunities or when I feel like something needs to be said, then I obviously have no problems doing that. But look, I want to be someone that inside this locker room, guys know that I'm going to be ready to play on Sunday, and I'm going to do my best to handle myself, as in a professional manner.
You've been a part of a lot of opening games, but how does this one feel different?
Yeah, look, you're playing a division opponent, so we know the weight that carries. But I think this year, this is the first time for me with the new offense, So I feel like we've seen how good this offense can be, and I know how good it can be, but we haven't been able to really see it, So as I look at this week, there's a lot of excitement for me to see, hey, what is this going to look like? I've been excited to see what the game week prep was going to look like with Clint and the staff, and now as I look forward to Sunday, I'm excited to finally have the opportunity to be in this system and go play with my teammates.
Head coach Dennis Allen added this story on the captain's dinner.
Well, I'll be quite honest with you. I think, and I told Taysom this at our dinner the other night, that he has a voice, and I think he needs to use it more often. Because when Taysom Hill speaks, people listen. because they respect the person and they respect that, he's the ultimate team player. He's a guy that has done everything the team has asked of him to do, even though that might not be selfishly what he wants to do. And that, to me, is the epitome of a team player. That's the epitome of what you want your captains to be.
I can't wait to get the season started. I know the fans are looking forward to being in the Dome again, and so are our players. I'm going to close this out with a bite from Brian Brzee so you can hear from him about his excitement level. But before I do that, do not forget to tune in to our pregame show Sunday, 11:30 on NewOrleansSaints.com and follow along at Saints on X throughout the game. All right, Brian, take us out.
Being back in the Dome, having all the fans there, I'm super excited. Not having camp here, we didn't get to spend a lot of time with everybody. So I'm super excited to be back in the Dome and get the thing jumping.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Saints podcast. Join us 3 times per week on NewOrleansSaints.com, the Saints mobile app, or you can download the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Saints podcast.